All right, starting the webinar. Um, uh-oh, chat. Here we go again. Every webinar. Do we have the chat enabled? That is the question. If
Oh
someone
man,
can type something in chat, that would be amazing.
I
Oh, it
believe we should.
works.
I think we
Yes.
should have the chat enabled. It's technology. We we fix things occasionally, and sometimes they fix us. It's hard to tell.
We are getting so much better with this. Look at us go.
Lots of yos.
Lots of yos. Preston, how
That's
are
lots of
you?
yos. I mean, here we
Armand,
go.
how are you?
We got the yo-yos. We got a bunch of Duncan fans out there today. I mean, because Duncan was the yo-yo of all yo-yos for me.
That's it.
Cory, you weren't a yo-yo guy from that. I don't think you're it. No.
No, I'm a young guy. What can I say? I'm super young. I'm just a baby.
Preston used to be able to walk the dog. Yeah. What do you mean you're a young guy? You act like yo-yos weren't around when you were a
They
kid.
were, but I'll just claim to be young. Come on. Come on.
No, I think you're just trying to be too cool.
But no, I always got frustrated with yo-yos. Imagine me getting frustrated with something like that. I got frustrated with yo-yos because I couldn't do it. My walking the dog is fishing. I can fish. Let's go. I'll walk the dog with the lure. So we got everybody rolling in. So we're gonna give everybody a little bit of time as per the usual.
Yep.
I like
Cory,
yeah.
I don't think everybody knows this, but for those of you that have joined us, this is our first international webinar.
That's it.
This is it, the first international webinar that Solutions Granted has ever done. And anybody can see the little video that I've got going on here. And you can see it here. I'm coming to you live from Canada. Yes, I am. I'm coming to you from Toronto. I'm here at the ASCII event. Got up here yesterday and went to a Blue Jays game. And, for those of you that watch any baseball at all, everyone knows, look, the Washington Nationals suck. We know they're a horrible team. They're awful. But what happened last night? The Nats beat the Blue Jays. I'm going to tell you, there might have been like two whole Nationals fans in the stadium, and they were not popular people last night.
I believe it. That was you, right? Yeah.
Well, one of them was me. I'm going to root for the hometown team. Not going to lie, and not being the hometown of where I'm at. But yes, yeah, great game though. I mean, it's one of those moments where it's like, okay, they were leading 5-1. Let's just go ahead and leave. Game's kind of over. And Dane, who is our Silence lead engineer. Did I get that right?
Silence. Yeah, team lead. He's a team lead.
Yeah, Silence team lead. So Dane and I were at the game, had a couple customers with us, and it's like getting into the ninth inning, and sure enough, the Jays mounted a comeback, and it was that pivotal moment. 3 balls, 2 strikes, 2 outs, runners in scoring position at second and third. Pop fly, game was over. And they
Yeah.
were 1 down, 1 run down. So it was a good game. Good game to watch. Good game to be a part of. So yeah, exciting news. And coming to you from the brothers to the north is where I'm from today.
So let me go ahead and share out my screen. Let's get this ball rolling. As people roll in. So why are we here today, Michael? What are we talking about?
I thought we were here to talk about baseball, but maybe I
Nope.
was wrong. Nope, not baseball. Okay, well,
Not
if
baseball,
we're
not Canada.
not
We
baseball
are.
and not Canada, so if it's 3 strikes and you're out, I better not get the next one wrong.
So we're here to talk about role playing. We're all going to role play. Guess what? We're all in charge. And it doesn't matter how much security training we've done for our customers, no matter how great our cybersecurity offerings are, no matter how great of best practices and policies we have in place, guess what? We were called and we were told that one of our customers has been compromised.
Yeah,
Can't believe
why is that word lined out right there?
we'll
What do we
get to
got
that.
going on?
We'll
Oh,
get
we're
to
gonna
that.
get okay. Sorry about
We
that.
compromised. So now what do we do? And this isn't a what if scenario. We've seen this a lot. I mean, here's our numbers just for our SOC alone. Now I pulled these rather quickly, but these are not incidents we investigated. These are incidents we've actually had to report. And as you can see, when it comes to criticals, we're going to totally outshine. Now, yes, we've had our growth.
We're gonna outshine 2022.
2022, and that's sad, but it's what it is, right? It is what's going to happen at any point. No matter what you do, there is always a possibility one of your customers can be hit. Now, with that, we do have to give a disclaimer. The purpose of this webinar is to not provide you specific direct guidance on creating your IR plan. There are many great resources for that. There are many great organizations that can help you create your IR plan. And I heavily recommend you have one and you discuss with your customers what your IR plan is. Now, a lot of what we're going to be talking about is situational based. Any incident that we have to deal with or any compromise that we have to deal with, the recovery from that or the remediation, even the mitigation is situational based, 100%. There is no cookie cutter plan for every exact situation, so you have to generalize a lot. But the key thing, and the thing that I see a lot of our partners struggling with is, okay, Solutions Granted SOC has called me. They've told me this machine's been compromised. They told me this account's been compromised. What the heck do I do?
Don't run and hide. That is not the appropriate action to take. Sticking your head underneath the pillow, hoping, wishing, praying that it'll go away. That's not going to make it better either.
Don't ignore it.
No,
we see this. I can tell you the majority of our incidents that we report go ignored or just no response. So I'll give it that. I'm not going to say that. I can't say they ignore them, but we receive no response. And then we see the same alert coming. Then we see the same alert. And we're still reporting the same alert. So ignoring it is just as bad. So if you've ever been in any of our webinars, you've probably seen this slide. We like to repeat our slides because they are always relevant. This is our incident response cycle. How are we supposed to respond to an attack? Now, it starts with, as you know, most of our offerings are co-managed. So we do it with you. We don't do it for you. With that being said, we have to always start with preparing and protecting. Get everything in place that we can get in place before the potential of an incident happens. Then there's detection, mitigation to contain the situation, further investigations that have to happen, and then the ultimate remediation. We do not provide full remediation. No organization should claim that they're doing full remediation for you because they are your customers. You have direct access to your customers.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of organizations out there that claim that they'll do your remediation for you. And if you hear it, and I'm sure some of you have heard me say this before, challenge it. Don't accept the words that are coming out of their mouth as the holy truth. Challenge it to understand really where the lines stop and start. If they say, hey, we're monitoring and we're going to remediate a business email compromise, then ask them the questions. Okay, so MFA wasn't in place. You're going to turn that on for me? You're going to go ahead and reset my customer's password and change it to something that's more secure? Or you're going to implement some other Microsoft best practices to help with the remediation? Because those are all things that you want to make sure that, hey, if the doctor looks at you and says, if you keep smoking those cigarettes, the chances are you're probably going to get lung cancer. Well, a remediation step would be to stop smoking, not do that anymore. And so if part of the remediation step is implementing a Microsoft best practices to make sure that it doesn't happen, it doesn't come back, you don't want somebody doing that for you. You want to make sure you do that because it's your customer and you own the relationship and you want to be able to communicate that clearly and effectively to them.
Exactly. So let's start with number one. Let's start with the prepare and protect because this is just as important as what happens afterwards. So first and foremost, know your organization. You are the MSP. You are the ones that are taking responsibility and you are providing these services to your customers. So first, you have to have a look in the mirror, right? What offerings are you currently providing? And what do those specific offerings, what is their purpose? What is their role? Can't tell you how many times I've gotten on calls, conversations. There's an upset customer, wants to know why we didn't alert on a password spray, as an example. And so unfortunately, I have to explain, we don't have those logs. We don't have your server logs. All you have is the antivirus. The antivirus is not going to flag on a password spray. We have the capability of doing it, but we need that data. We need those logs. And so that's why it's so important that you understand what is the purpose of an AV? What is the purpose of an EDR? Why would we ask for your firewall logs? Why are we monitoring 365? Is 360, monitoring of your 365 logs going to account for a virus hitting your computer? More than likely not. That's what an AV does. So you have to understand the purposes and the roles of each of the products that you are providing. Likewise, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's really important. Like you said, Corey, you were talking about, the instance where somebody's calling you saying, hey, can you help me with this? But they don't even have that technology in place. And sometimes it's just not really understanding what you're buying. So make sure you ask the right questions, make sure you look for the clarity, and make sure you try to control some of that vendor sprawl. Vendor sprawl can really hurt you at a time when you have an incident taking place, because then you start to get confused as to who you call, why you call, when you don't call. And we've had it happen to us. I mean, there's some misconceptions around MDR. You've got MDR and it's running on your Windows, Linux, and Mac environments. And then all of a sudden there's a business email compromise in Microsoft 365. And it's well, can you tell me how they got in? It's like, sorry, you don't have that offering for us. We have it and we can do MDR for cloud. We could certainly help you with that, but you didn't have it there. So you want to make sure that like Cory said, it's really, really important to know who has the roles, what responsibility they have, so that when you have that moment, you can execute with purpose and direction.
And that sucks. It really does suck. I like to be transparent with anybody and everybody. I don't like saying, well, you're not paying for that. Right. That's, that's tough. That's a real tough conversation. Hey, we could, but you're not doing that with us. That's a very hard conversation to have. I try to be more political than that, but it's what it comes down to. If we don't have the information, we don't have the visibility. And on that note, you have to understand who your vendors are. As you said, there's a big vendor sprawl. So you might be using other third-party vendors besides Solutions Granted, right? So, you might have another SOC. You might have two SOCs. You might have this SOC monitoring one thing, us monitoring another thing. Well, keep in mind, us and we'll use Arctic Wolf. Us and Arctic Wolf, we don't talk to each other. So if they're monitoring your 365, but we're monitoring your endpoint, both of us are kind of in the dark here to what happens on the other side. Or likewise, maybe you're taking advantage of something like Huntress. What is Huntress's purpose and role? What do they look for? What is their actions, right? So obviously we can't speak for other vendors and other services that you're using. So you have to understand who's responsible for what, because when an event happens, you need to know who you're calling. You could be calling all of us, who knows, depending upon the situation, right? But you need to have that information clear so that you know how to respond in a quick and efficient manner. Then what are your gaps in your security offerings? We hear this all the time. I know Brian especially hears it all the time from the MSPs, where your customers don't want to pay for it. They want everything for free, right? They want all the coverage for $2 a month, right? But that's not how much things cost, and costs are going up significantly for everybody. So you have to understand and document so that it's audible. What are the gaps in your current security offering? If they're
Cory, you mentioned one thing there for a second. I want to touch about this, where they talk about customers not wanting to pay for something. Biggest number one reason right now that we're hearing from our MSPs is they don't feel that they're at risk. They don't understand why what they were doing last week, last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, why it should be any different today. Come up with a story. Stories sell. Stories tell. Make this easy on yourself. Maybe if it's somebody who drove around before and they didn't have disc brakes, tell the story about why disc brakes are so much better today. If they didn't have anti-lock brakes, well, why are anti-lock brakes so much better today? We're all seeing that every car that's being manufactured has, automatic braking and collision avoidance systems for us today. There's reasons behind this. This technology is powerful to help save us, and it's no different than what's happening in the threat landscape with your clients today. So as you're preparing to protect and help them defend against, what is coming and what is happening, make sure that they understand and use some of those common analogies of things that they're using in their house. The thermostat, whether they've got a Nest thermostat or they're still over there, punching the numbers up or punching the numbers down. It's nice to have intelligent technologies that can help us from ourselves.
Exactly. And then finally, understanding who is the best technical staff in your organization in the event of an incident, right? I get it. Everybody has their right-hand man. Michael, I've always been Michael's right-hand man. I'll Will is too, but it's me. It's always about me, right? But we all have our technical staff that needs to stop what they're doing and work on this. Are they aware of that? Do they know that? How are you maintaining the rest of your organization? Because you have other customers that you have to provide services to while you're dealing with an incident. So make sure that you have this accounted for in your own environment in your IR plan. That when one of your customers is hit, who's stepping up to the plate? Who is the one that's taking calls, right? Do multiple use case scenarios when you're going through this process. Now, let's move on to your customers and how much information you need to know about your customers. First
A
and
lot more
foremost,
than they have today, Cory. They need to
yeah,
have a lot more than they already have.
what you have to understand in the event that there's an issue, that there's an incident, there's a compromise, your customers are not going to be the most calm individuals. So they are not going to be the best person to contact cyber insurance, as an example. They're not going to be the best individuals to do the actual remediation. They need a mediary who is going to be you, the MSP, helping guide them of what they're doing. So what you need to do is first and foremost, start documenting information on your customers. Great one is cyber insurance. If you have a PSA, right? If you have information on all of your customers, you should be recording if they have cyber insurance, what company they use, what the agent name is, what's the policy number, what's the phone number and email to call in the event of an incident. You
Why
need
is
to
that,
be,
Cory? Why does the MSP need to have that information? How is that helpful for the customer?
because the customer, one, is not going to know. They're not going to have the information readily available, and they're not going to know how to move forward. They are not the experts on this.
I would even add another one. So I think one other factor is that we have moved into this paperless digital world. And if your client, let's hope it doesn't happen, but when and if it comes and they get hit with ransomware and everything is encrypted, well, in this paperless digital world, how do they get that information? Where do they come to? You have the opportunity by taking a couple extra steps in your onboarding process to grab these pieces of information so that you get to be that lighthouse. You get to be that beacon of sanity, if you will, and you can readily have all of this information available to them because, like, look, I don't know whether any of you have ever been in a really bad car accident, or maybe you've been involved in a house fire, or maybe being a police officer, being a paramedic, being a fireman, being a military member, when you run into that situation, um, Cory, what's the saying? What does Mikey Mike have to say about this? Mikey Mike Tyson. What's he
Oh,
saying?
everyone's got,
Yeah,
sorry. Everyone's got a plan until they're punched in the mouth.
that's right. When your client has this incident or this event, they've been punched in the mouth. You know, very few plans survive the first contact. So make sure that you're there to back them up and provide them this. This is a simple thing. This is really easy. I know a lot of MSPs, for whatever reason, aren't doing this. So hopefully, if nothing else, you come out of this today. One simple thing is you onboard your net new customers. You always add this. And when you do your next QBR, you do your next review with them, whatever it may be, tell them why you're gathering this information so that you can be in it with them when the day comes.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of my favorite memes. Hey, we need to go to our backups. We've been compromised. Well, where are the backups? They're on the server that was compromised. Awesome. Compliance standards. Understand what compliance standards each of your customers are must adhere to, right? So PCI, HIPAA, CMC. I mean, there's a million different compliances out there. I know there's not a million, right? But you have to understand each of your customers and have that information and know that off the top of the head. So if an incident does affect them, you know how to move forward because it is different per compliance standard.
You also need to think about the reporting requirements because they are different. I mean, so you could talk about things like HIPAA and PCI and CMMC and SOX and GLP and GDPR, but then as you look around the country and you look at some of the cybersecurity and policies, or maybe say things that are being put in place, you look at California, you look at Louisiana, you look at New York, and it seems like most every state that has something has made it very easy to understand what the reporting requirements are. And the states that don't have it, they're working on it and they're putting it out there. So you want to understand one, well, where's the client located? Because I know that some of you are probably working with customers that are not just in the state where you operate within. You want to make sure you've got a good baseline and don't feel that this is your responsibility to figure it out for them. Gather enough of the information and provide it to them so that they can understand what their reporting requirement is, because they may have legal counsel. And so between them and legal counsel, they can begin to decide and understand what those standards are and how they're going to adhere to them to make sure that they are or are not reporting what is important.
Understand the major assets on every of your customers' networks, whether it's endpoints, users, or the data that's being stored. Michael, would you say it's different if your CFO is her account's compromised compared to myself, who sweeps random forms of vegetation in the parking lot part-time?
Yeah, I'm going to say that if our CFO gets compromised, it is a really hard, rough, ugly day. I mean, she has access to so many things and all necessary. She doesn't have elevated privileges in ways that she shouldn't have them. But man, she has access to so many. I mean, our bank accounts, to where we file taxes in the 40 some odd states that we're filing sales tax in. So yeah, our CFO gets compromised. It's a bad day. Cory, I love you. I mean it. And you are my right hand and Will is my left hand. But I'm going to tell you, if she gets hit, it's a harder day than the one of you.
Well, I was putting myself at, that's all I do is sweep random forms of vegetation.
Yeah.
If I get hit, that's a big issue as well. But it's you have to understand, right? Again, while anybody gets hit in an organization is a big deal, there are key critical assets in your environment that make you look at things and have to process things a lot differently. Higher risk, sensitive data. Are your tools deployed and running everywhere? This is a huge one. And something I preach all the time and beg our partners to do. Please, if you're using an RMM tool, you should be monitoring any and every service with your RMM tool related to security, whether it's your antivirus, whether it's your EDR, whether you're using something like ThreatLocker, whether you're using something like Huntress. I don't care. Any security product you have on your endpoint, you should be monitoring those services if they have an agent deployed. And if those services go down for whatever reason, that RMM tool has the capability, I haven't found one that hasn't yet, to attempt to restart that service. And if that service doesn't restart, it should create a ticket on your ticketing board for your engineers to take a look at. Well, thank you. So that's key, because I can't tell you how many incidents where 99% of the environment has the agents deployed, and it's that 1% that gets hit. Happens all the time. And they're looking for those. So ensure that they're running everywhere, ensure you're monitoring it, and have some type of compensating control to address in the event that one of those services stops or the program stops functioning.
I'm going to come back just to one thing on your major assets on the networks, because it's endpoints and users and data. Maybe a simple way for some of our partners is to just classify them as high, medium, and low. Is this a high profile user? Is this a medium profile user? Is this a low profile user? And that can be a part of your discussion with your client, making sure that they tell you, hey, if we have an outage, if we have an event, if we just even have a server crash, or we've got data corruption, let's not even assume that it's a compromise or an incident. Let's just assume that there's some sort of interruption. Who are the highest profile users that have to be restored first? And what is the highest profile data? So create that simple chart of your high, medium, and low for your data and your users and those endpoints. And from there, because you're not in the fog of war, you're in that moment of calm clarity. That will help you when the recovery process starts to take place. You've already got a framework to move forward, and you don't have to ask them when they're freaking out because they haven't been able to manufacture their widget for the last 2 days and they're losing $8,472 an hour. This is something that allows you to be calm, clear, and allows them to run around with like their hair on fire.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, moving on to, if I can get this PowerPoint to work. There we go. So you've probably seen this slide with us before as well. So we've talked heavily on what happens on the left side of an event. So in our world, that's also called a boom. An event has actually occurred. So we focus on the left side of it, preparing and protecting. Now, the big reason why you're in here is we also need to account for what happens after an event occurs, also known as right of the boom. First and foremost, first thing you should not do is use the B word.
Corey, my mom
Count,
would wash your mouth out with
nope,
soap right
count
now.
the amount of letters.
Oh, okay,
Count the
okay.
amount
Wait a
of
second. I'm wrong.
letters.
Not the one I'm thinking about. Sorry. My mom was going to be really mad at you.
You've heard us say this in webinars. You've heard us say this live. If you haven't, then now you've heard me say it again. Do not use the word breach. The problem with breach, Michael, you say it so much eloquently. I'll let you under here.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, we all know that there's lots of synonyms for words out there. So you can use the word event, you can use the word compromise, you can use the word incident. They all have the same meaning as the word breach, but when you start using the breach word, you have made an attestation to something that could potentially find you in legal jeopardy. Some attorney, some cybersecurity insurance, some whomever knows whatever has come in and said, well, you said it, therefore you're the subject matter expert. So why didn't you follow the protocols that go along with it? Stay away from the word. If your client wants to use it, tell them I would suggest that you don't do that. Tell them to use one of these other words. But you definitely, as a subject matter expert, you definitely don't want to get caught up by some attorney that is beating you down and telling you that you didn't follow proper protocol after this breach because you should know better because you're the expert. And since you're the expert and you said it, now you're responsible. Stay away from it.
It's a very powerful word.
Yeah,
that's
it
for
is.
Sure. So what do we do first? First and foremost, remain calm. We talked about this earlier. You're going to be a lot more calm than your customers are, right? They're going to have a lot more of that fog of war of what Michael was talking about. But we need to start prioritizing handling these incidents based off, and Michael kind of hit on a lot of them earlier, right? If you've accounted for your key assets for each of your customers, you know who needs to get back online first. Obviously, your customer needs everybody online, but that's not typically how this works. We need to identify what assets in the event that we have to take everything down, what needs to come up first so that we're bleeding far less when it comes to our business model.
Cory, there was one, and I never even thought about this, but after the Kaseya compromise, there was a gentleman that was talking about, he's talking about all of his customers. And as the FBI got involved with him to give advice and guidance and assistance, the FBI started prioritizing which customers would get serviced first. And it came down to critical infrastructure, powers and municipalities. And so, that was a really tough thing, but he got put into a position where the FBI said, hey, you've got this 911 call center, you've got this ambulance company, you've got this fire department. These will become your priorities because these become life-saving services and you have to restore them first. Now, no commercial business wants to be deprioritized, but I think, at that moment in time, when we think about like, okay, I am the manufacturer of Post-it notes, and this is really going to suck, and I'm going to go down, and I'm probably going to lose tons of money because I can't get my product to the market. But if that 911 call center cannot answer that call, cannot go save that person who's in cardiac arrest, well, we don't want to, maybe admit it. I would be the first one to say, hey, please take care of them first, because that life is something that is more valuable and more precious than what I'm dealing with over here. So make sure that when you're prioritizing this, you talk to your clients that way and get them to understand, again, what is that priority one for them? Because you can't have a whole bunch of priority ones. It's not possible because it'll be failure for sure.
Yeah. We need to get the facts first and foremost and assess the damage before we really dive into this. So if we just dive into this head first and just don't have any plan to this, then we're going to fail, plain and simple. So you, as the MSP, who this is ultimately falling on, need to identify what is really happening. So great example, whether it's us, whether it's another organization that's sending you an alert saying, hey, this potential, this endpoint's compromised, this account's compromised, you need to validate that information. Validate how big of a widespread issue. Is this one user, one endpoint, or is this something that's affecting the whole organization? Do I actually see evidence that an infection is actively in the environment? Is there ransomware anywhere? Or did the antivirus do its job and I need to take a different approach? Is there any way for me to identify if there's data exfiltration that happened? Especially if this customer has confidential information or sensitive information. high medical, high financial, stuff like that, right? We need to know if any of this data was exfiltrated. And then document everything that you're doing. Starting at the first step, you should be documenting everything you're doing, because in the event that you bring in a third party, whether it's legal counsel, whether it's cyber insurance, you're going to need to have all of that information documented to provide them so they can do what they need to do. Now, we had a similar incident today, overnight, where we had a scanner that was quarantined on a domain controller, and we contacted the partner and said, "Hey," and this was a high sensitive customer of theirs. "Hey, we identified, the antivirus quarantined a network scanner on your domain controller for this customer. This is a critical incident for us based off of the time, what server it was, the customer, and it's a tool that's a common use tool for big compromises that have happened in the past." After further investigation, turned out it wasn't a live incident. It turns out that it was something that was copied over from prior, that the antivirus updated itself and was able to find that file out there and convicted it. But without that information, without that partner going through and doing the due diligence of going through these steps, okay, what's the incident? What happened? Is this valid? Was there infection? He looked at actual server logs. He was able, which we didn't have, right? He looked through, say, okay, when is this time this last person is logged in? Was this a live copy? Is this something, what's going on? He did everything he needed to do within a 15-minute period to identify, oh, okay, this is something that's older. So you have to keep calm and go through these steps first. Then
Brad,
at the same time,
I want to add one more thing around the facts, the assessing, and the damage. Tell the truth. Now, we have this happen to us quite frequently, where there is an incident that takes place and we're on the phone and we're working with one of our partners, and we'll ask certain questions. And the questions are fairly similar every single time. Does the client have MFA? Is there open RDP? Do you have conditional access in place? Have you taken away administrative rights? What does your patch management look like? Some very simple things that help us sometimes get the lay of the land, especially if it's a new partner to us and they're bringing us an incident because they need an IR team and we're handling it. Treat it like your lawyer, treat it like your doctor, treat it like your priest, treat it like whatever person you find that you would never want to mislead or tell a lie. A lie being a little bit harsh. If you don't know, say you don't know. It's better to pause, investigate, understand, and report than it is just to say, I guarantee you that everybody's got MFA. And then you start looking into it, and then you find out, well, a couple people don't have MFA, and we knew that the CEO of the organization wouldn't let us turn it on for him or for her, or, oh, we must have forgotten to turn it back on. It's one of those things that trust but verify. And if you are not 100% sure, it's always better to say, I don't know. Saying I don't know is not a point of weakness. It's not a point of incompetence. It's I don't know the answer, but give me 30 seconds and I'll have it for you. Something like that shows an intent to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem.
Yeah. Focus on containment. If you remember our tiers earlier on incident response, first thing is prepare and protect. Next thing is to detect. Right after detect is mitigation, which is a fancier way of saying we need to contain this situation. Take it off the network. Disable an account, right? One thing you don't necessarily want to do, unless it's your only option to stop the bleeding, is to never shut down an endpoint, because there's a lot of forensic information that might be valuable that if you shut down the endpoint, gone, disappear. At this point, in the beginning phases, you are like the first responder driving that ambulance, going to a scene. You need to stop the bleeding. You don't need to be the medical examiner yet, right, to identify what's the bigger picture or to do a further investigation. Your first priority is to contain the situation and stop the bleeding. Some business considerations that you also need to take is, when do you need to contact legal counsel? When do you need to contact cyber insurance? An easy answer, there's no super easy answer, but the easy answer is, has sensitive data been compromised? If the answer is possibly yes, you need to immediately do this. Is there a potential of PHI information being exfiltrated, financial information being exfiltrated? Immediately, yes, you need to involve legal counsel. And then after you've talked to legal counsel, you call the cyber insurance company. Then you call your legal counsel back and tell them what you told the cyber insurance company, because that will keep you covered. Determine what information needs to be shared with your customers and when. I said an earlier conversation earlier where we reported an alert based off of what we saw, based off what we had visibility to, and it turned out to not be a full incident. It turned out to be a bigger story that was found. So if that partner would have immediately called the customer and said, we have an incident, your house is on fire, when it wasn't, because you didn't do the first steps first and get the facts, right, then it would have caused a bigger issue. So determine what, again, when you're creating these IR plans, make sure you identify what information needs to be passed to them and at what point. And legal, your own legal, will also help you guide you for this as well. Cost
Hey,
of
Cory,
down.
there was a good question that just came in. I want to take you off the tracks here for a minute, but Diana put in a question. She goes, can you go a little more granular on when you guys call us about a workstation alert? When that happened, I disconnected the device from the internet, but that was actually a mistake because your team had isolated, but then they weren't able to get other information that would have been helpful.
Okay. And this also goes into the case-by-case basis. So for Solutions Granted Security Operations Center, we have 3 different categories of alerts. First one is a minor alert. That means that the SOC analyst has seen some information or seen something that is identified as abnormal to them, just doesn't sit right with them. So they will send you an email and they'll say, hey, here's what I found and here's why I'm contacting you and why it didn't sit right with me, in layman's terms. There is a high potential of a false positive. We did not take any mitigation steps in this. It's just something that we want you to validate because you have more access. You have direct access with the customer. You know the customer. So we just want to know, hey, this looks abnormal to us. We want to make sure you're aware, right? That's a minor alert. A major alert, we're stepping it up to something that's suspicious and potentially malicious. This is loosely associated that the antivirus or the security product has done its job. It's stopped. There is no live compromise happening, but there is additional investigation steps that we are recommending you perform. An easy example is a phishing attack, right? We see that a phishing attack hit one of your customers. They fell for it. They try to download a payload from that. The antivirus quarantined that, and there is no live compromise that we've been able to identify, but there's additional steps you might want to do as the MSP. One, find out why that phishing email got past your email security. Talk to that user, right? Because maybe we're not monitoring their 365. You need to know, did they put in their username and password by chance when they clicked on that malicious link within that phishing email? There's additional steps that you need to do to identify, is there a bigger issue here? Does this go from a major to a critical? A critical means that we have a high confidence that a compromise has occurred. On a major alert, we will send you an email. We send an email for everything, but on a major alert, depending upon what we're seeing, our SOC analysts have the authority to go ahead and call you. We haven't taken any mitigation steps, but we are calling you because it's high enough. We don't have that super high confidence. We're not that percentage high to know that, hey, there's a live compromise happening, but it's enough that we need to call you for you to immediately stop what you're doing and perform that investigation. Now, that critical alert, we're calling you no matter what. We're calling you 4 times in the first hour, and then we're calling you every hour on top of the hour. And it sucks when we have to do that. So we hope you answer the phone the first or at least second time, but there's been cases where we've been calling for 6 hours until someone answers the phone. So when we ask for emergency contact information, we will always be calling you from our business number. Add it as your contacts. A lot of people, including myself, sleep on do not disturb and the phone only rings when someone in the contact lists calls you. So you should add us as a contact, because I don't think Brian's being an overachiever and calling you at 12 a.m. because you can't sleep to try to sell you another great product from Solutions Granted. Now, when we perform mitigation steps with critical events, depending upon what it is. So if it's an endpoint, like a workstation, a laptop, a server, we can perform isolation. So we use our EDR products to be able to isolate that endpoint except to us. We maintain connectivity to it. That way we can perform additional steps. Because as I said earlier, number 1 is contain the situation, stop the bleeding. And that's what we're trying to perform. Now, there's times where we're not able to. Maybe you don't have the EDR deployed. Maybe there's no tool in place for us to perform it. So we're going to make you aware in that alert, or when we call you to say, hey, unfortunately, we weren't able to take any isolation steps or mitigation steps. Then yes, you need to take some type of action, whether it's connect to that machine and kill the connection, pull the plug if you can, or last resort, if you need to power that bad boy down, do what you have to do to stop the bleeding. So it is really case by case basis. If it's a account that's been compromised, like a 365 account, we'll talk about that at the end of this webinar, where we're working on more mitigation steps around 365. We're just waiting on additional development. But we should be clear when we're calling you or in the ticket whether we've already performed those mitigation steps. And feel free to ask questions, call in. If we send you an alert and you need to talk to someone, call in. Say, hey, I need to speak to someone on the SOC about this event that they sent me, and get clarity. Because we're technical guys. Don't get us wrong. And sometimes the words we use or the way we form them aren't super crystal clear in layman's terms. And I have some SOC analysts like that. They'll use a bunch of big words, a bunch of things that it's just like, hey, well, we need to kind of blend this out a little bit here. Dan, I hope that answered your question. Back to the slides. Cost of downtime versus cost of compromise. Do not let your customers tell you can't take down their network for a live compromise that's happening. And unfortunately, we've seen this all too often. I need you to account for risk. I need you to think about the cost of taking down the environment that is at the beginning of a compromise compared to leaving it running and it becomes a bigger compromise. And unfortunately, we see
I love your analogy when it comes to this, when we're talking to our partners to get them to realize is we act an awful like firefighters. When Cory's team knows and understands that they have the highest faith and confidence that this one is as bad as it gets. And we won't say that we're perfect because nothing is perfect, but let's say we get to that 99th percentile of, yes, this is something bad. It's malicious. We got it. We know it. We're going to shut it down if we can. We're going to contain it when we can. Hopefully we always can. We have been yelled at. We have been MF'd. We have been told all kinds of crazy things. One particular incident, there was a data exfiltration taking place, and it was happening on a domain controller. We acted under the right protocol and we shut it down. Obviously, that has a huge effect to the environment. No DNS, lots of other problems came from that. And the response from their director of IT from this organization is, I don't care how bad it is, you never shut it down without my permission. Like, okay, well then just go ahead and give it to me in writing and we'll go ahead and turn it back up. But just be clear, they are in your house, they are stealing your stuff, and they're actively walking it out the front door. And the moment we turn it back on, they are going to keep on going and they're going to keep on stealing. So whatever they're exfiltrating, whatever they're taking from you, it is going to go from bad to worse. So, we're going to do the right thing. And sometimes that's going to get us yelled at, and that's okay. I think we've got thick skin and we can handle it. And, if that's how somebody wants to act, again, these are stressful times and stressful situation. And, we're okay with that. It's going to happen.
Yeah. I remember that situation. I remember that analyst was very rattled after that.
Yeah.
He just couldn't understand because he's passionate about what he was doing. And the fact that he got yelled at for doing what he thought was the right thing to do, and I agree was the right thing to do. He had to take a walk around the building a couple times to
it's,
kind of recover.
It's not easy when you do the right thing and somebody's MFing you.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And I mean, it takes a lot, man. I'm going to tell you, to be honest, that starts happening to me. It takes an awful lot for me to keep my mouth shut and not fire back. But that's a tough one.
All right. Technical considerations. I'm going to speak a little faster, be cognizant of time. One, protect your backups. I made a comment earlier about my favorite meme, right? If your backups are on the server that got encrypted, those backups are gone. You need to protect your backups after an incident as well. So in the event an incident occurs, you might need to do something with those backups to help protect them so that in case your remediation steps cause a bigger issue, you can still go back to those backups. You need to account for if there's potential that those backups have compromised information in it as well. Obviously, you don't want to restore a virus back onto an endpoint or restore connectivity or persistence back onto that endpoint. So you need to protect your backups. Identify how they got in. What's the entry point? That's the number one conversation I have after these conversations. Hey, they didn't just get on your domain controller willy-nilly. That's not a good example, but you know what I mean, right? They just hop on your domain controller, or did they? What's your firewall look like? What kind of firewall do you have? Is it licensed? Do you have the security products turned on? Right? If they came in from, let's say, North Korea, why are you not blocking North Korea on your firewall? Are you using VPN? Is VPN configured on there? So there's a lot, what's your open RDP ports? How many times, Michael, have we talked about open RDP ports?
Man,
And it still happens.
It's unfortunate it continues to happen. And, a lot of it is like, well, Microsoft encrypts it, so it's okay. Well, you don't think that Microsoft has a vulnerability in that operating system or in that protocol or whatever it may be. Or, hey, the best one that I love is, well, we changed the port. Oh, man, really? You changed the port? Okay, well, I put the deadbolt on my door at the bottom of the door instead of in the middle of the door, and there was no way they were going to find it. Or you'd never find my deadbolt because it's at the bottom.
Or we can look at 365. Why is MFA not turned on? Why are you not using conditional access rules that blocks access from countries users shouldn't be logging in from? Had that incident today where 2 accounts were compromised due to a phishing email. The first person fell for the phishing email, put in their credentials, sent it to one of their coworkers and said, hey, can you access this? That person put in their credentials. No MFA was in place. We alerted on a login from a country, LI. I can't remember what it is. It's a country I've never been to or probably even heard. My geography is not that great. Don't mind me. And there it is. And then we were told that he enabled MFA for everybody today. Awesome. Okay. Prepare and protect. It's the first thing we focused on, right? If this was in place beforehand. So we need to identify how do they get in so we can patch that when we're going through remediation. Change all passwords. Scrub your Active Directory for accounts, right? There should be 0 people, and you've heard us say this a million times, 0 people in enterprise admin, schema admins. If there's one thing you do today, go through your internal. Look at who's in your enterprise admins and schema admins, because there should be 0 people, including the default domain admin. 0 people in there. Go through all your domain admins. Pull logs. Identify. There's plenty of tools. If you don't want to go through logs yourself, there's plenty of tools that will tell you when accounts were created. Look at brand new accounts that were created for persistence. I've seen organizations where the domain admin list is so long, they don't even know half of what's in there. Pull it all out, rip it all out, and add people in one by one. A lot of times, changing one password is not enough. It's far easier. Change every single password in that environment, not just users. We're talking about local admins. We're talking about service accounts. It's pretty darn easy to go ahead and create. And I digress on this one. I do this a little differently, but the easier route is to change everyone's password to the same thing. Tell them what that password is, has them log in right now and change that password. Easy. And that just helps secure you and make sure you account for all your passwords. Is MFA in place? We already hit on that, but we still see just as much as OpenRDP, MFA not being in place because the customers won't let them have it. Could personal data have been compromised? We talked about that earlier. Now, saving browser passwords, we've seen this a lot. So you have to think about and account for, if I'm an adversary, I'm on Jim's endpoint, is Jim saving passwords in his browser? Because you can be the hero here. You can let Jim know, guess what? They now have your bank password. They now have your Gmail password. They have all of your passwords now because you were storing it in your internet browser, and you need to change every single one of those passwords. It happens, and it happens all the time.
We've seen MSPs do it. Cory, I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, we had an MSP that was saving the passwords in the browser to the admin console, and somebody got into their admin console and was able to disable their endpoint security. And they were wondering, how is this possible? What happened? And I'm going to find out. It was open RDP into the environment. So they found their way in. They were able to scrape the passwords out of the browser. Well, they didn't even have to scrape the passwords out of the browser. They got remote access, and then they were able to just execute through the browser.
Think about it. Laptops. You're at a hotel. We were recently at a conference, and a very high profile individual, and we were in Vegas a week before Black Hat was happening. This high profile individual was on the hotel Wi-Fi, like most people do. And his laptop got compromised because he was being targeted.
Yeah, that one was purposeful. That wasn't a drive-by shotgun approach. I think that was somebody that would do exactly what they were doing.
But think about how many times all of us have been on a hotel Wi-Fi, right? And if you're saving your browser password or your passwords in your browser, anybody can get them. It's just that easy. As I hit on multiple times, document, document, document. In the event that an event, you bring in an IR team, legal counsel, you need to be able to provide them step by step what actions have already been taken, because it is literally that important. Hey, you ever seen the slide?
I've seen it once or twice.
Everybody that joins our webinars is so sick of seeing the slide. But
I'll be talking about it in about an hour.
Yeah.
Because I'm here at the ASCII event in Toronto, and they're going to get a dose of this here in about an hour.
Until it stops happening, we're going to keep showing the slide in every single webinar. We'll randomly put it up or randomly like flash on the screen for 2 seconds because it keeps happening. And we've talked about it today.
MFA. I heard something. I was listening to this leadership book recently, and this guy was talking about, as executives, as leaders, as whatever. He says everybody should carry the title of CRO. And the first thing that runs through my mind as I'm hearing this is like Chief Revenue Officer. I was like, what does that have to do with it? And he's like, no, Chief Repeating Officer. You have to keep repeating the message that you want to be heard. And it doesn't matter how many times you've said it, how many years you've said it, how many months you've said it. If it's the truth and the problem still exists, keep repeating it. It is your job. It is our job as an industry, as an MSSP, as MSPs, as leaders, as subject matter experts. Be the chief repeating officers and keep saying the story over and over again until we don't have the problem anymore.
That's it. All right. Since I have the stage, I want to talk about some product offering news. While I have a quick stage, there are things coming up. I did send out an email last week about our Cloud Threat Analytics offering that is on the SaaS Alerts platform. If you haven't received this email, let me know. Reach out to Brian, reach out to whoever your CAM is, right? We now have Fortify, which is the ability to create a compliance checklist and score for each of your customers if you're on the Cloud Threat Analytics offering. We also need you to onboard response so that we can take mitigation steps when an account is compromised. On the Silence Protect side, a lot of things a lot of people were asking for is coming. Things I've been asking for, right? Where we now have a math model behind active scripts and PowerShell scripts. We can now, instead of just relying on whitelisting, we can block based off a score-based system for abnormal and unsafe, just like we do for files on the Silence side. We can kick off manual full scans. BTD scans are the full scans. We get that question a lot. Hey, can I kick off a manual scan remotely? Previous answer was no. Coming very soon, the answer is going to be yes. More accountability for the PowerShell console. So being able to, right now, PowerShell console is on or off. Are you blocking it or are you allowing it? Well, now we can take multiple tiers. We can ignore it, we can allow it, we can alert on it, we can block it. So great steps coming on the Silence Protect field. Our MDR offering, we now have more granular EDR suppressions. One thing we're heavily focusing on is compromised Screen Connect sessions. So you will probably see us reaching out to you, validating certain Screen Connect session activity that we've seen, just so we can create a baseline of your organization and how you use Screen Connect for your customers. We also have a rollback feature. The rollback feature is integrated with our ransomware defense feature. So in the event that ransomware occurs, we can roll back. Now, if you've ever talked to me, you know I hate rollback features that certain organizations have that leverage shadow copies because those are easily targeted and deleted. And then the use cases of them are just minimal, super nil. With this, we don't leverage that. They have a custom mini filter that records changes to files, but you'll have the ability to roll them back. Likewise, on the Evo side, we now have support around user groups and RDP support. On the Avanan side, we have the ability for auto blocking of compromised accounts. With that, we are also working on the integration of the Avanan products into our SOC, our Security Operations Center. That is not live yet. We are working on that. As you can imagine, when we add a new offering into our SOC, there's a lot of training processes, procedures that need to go into play. But we're seeing a lot of great combination between our Cloud Threat Analytics and the Avanan side, which makes up our CDR, our cloud detection and response, that we can combine the layers there and be able to provide great services behind that. Last thing is the status page. If we've been heavily using this recently, if you want to know, is there a Silence outage? Is there an issue with GMS? Is there an issue with Avanan? Is there an issue with any of these? You can subscribe. If you go to status.solutionsgranted.com, you can subscribe to our status page. We are providing real insights and alerts directly to you in the event that something goes down and when it comes back up. That way you don't have to go to a million other sites to find out, is this what's down, what's going on? Is this an issue? Let me submit a ticket. If there's a known issue, we're going to post it on there. You want to talk more? Feel free to scan this barcode. It's only full of minimal malware, where if you scan it with your phone, it will bring up your email. If you've been on our webinars, you know we do this. It'll send an email direct to us so that someone from our sales team can reach out to you and talk to you about whatever you want to talk about. Even if it's a private conversation with Michael or myself to go over anything that we talked about today. If you want to talk about baseball and how he's enjoying Canada, by all means, let's talk. We're all for conversations. Before we part out, is there any saved questions?
Yep, I've got one. I've heard that it's better to have legal counsel contact insurance provider to protect you and the client from saying the wrong thing to the insurance company. Is this good advice or not, and why? So I think, yes, I think it's sage advice. I think it's actually really good if the client of yours has legal counsel. Not a lot of companies have legal counsel. And if they do, it's generic. It isn't really, attorneys are funny. Some of them really believe, well, I'm an attorney, I can do anything. I'll just read the case law and it'll be fine. Really understand if they have legal counsel, do they have any expertise in dealings in the cyber field? Have they dealt with a compromise? And, are they going to be available when the compromise happens? So if they have it, maybe they can give them a script. Maybe they are on call for them. Maybe they'll be ready, Johnny on the spot, and it'll be fantastic and great. So is it good advice? Yes. If you don't have legal counsel, you yourself, I would 100% talk to somebody like Brad Gross. I think he's great, amazing, an invaluable resource to an MSP, especially when it comes to your MSAs. Will probably also give you much better advice when it comes to this question than me. I know there's some other great organizations out there. There's a company called Scott and Scott. I know they've rebranded and they're calling themselves something else right now. But my personal choice, if I had to, is I'm picking up the phone and calling Brad and I'm making sure that I've got a relationship with him. And oh, by the way, we do. That is somebody that we think he's amazing. He's awesome. He's fantastic. If you have not had the opportunity to deal with him or partake in his wisdom and advice, you probably want to. Cory, one thing, and I know we talked about it, you and I have talked about it behind the scenes, but something that we are going to work on is we're going to work on an incident response checklist. I think we're going to work it just a little bit different than what we've seen in the past from some other really great ones. But I think we're going to do a left of boom, boom, right of boom incident response checklist. So, that idea of some of the things that we talked about in that phase one that we really went over today, put those things in there. Get this, get this, get this, know this, know this, know this. So that way you can follow that checklist. And maybe if it's even something that you just hand over to your clients, the things that happen right at the moment as the compromise kicks off and takes place, and then how you work the recovery. So something to come, don't know, hopeful that we'll have it done by the end of the year. I hope. But yeah, that's something big on the horizon. I don't think we've got any other questions.
There was a quick question about the Google Password Manager. I've never used it. When I look at passwords managers, I need to look at features. Important features to me are encrypted vault. I look at, if I have a password manager integrated in my browser, if I open up my browser and it's instantly there, it's useless. I need to be able to set up parameters like if all browsers are closed, it logs me out. In activity time, it logs me out. Because in the event someone gets on your endpoint, if they have direct access to your password manager, it's just as safe as you having an Excel document sitting there on your desktop. So you have to look at the security features. And you have to look at the specifics in it. Unfortunately, I've never used the Google one. LastPass is very popular. OnePass is very popular. Passkeep, very popular. That's, I see, rising up more than any of them.
Yep.
Keeper, that's
Keeper.
what it's called.
Yeah, Keeper is another one that we're seeing is becoming really, really popular, and they've got some fantastic features that seems to be making people really happy today.
Yeah.
Cory, I'm going to take this one last question, then we're going to call it because we're right here at the top of the hour. I've got one question that says, how does Silence Protect compare to deep instinct? It's a great question. I think sometimes in this field, we get wrapped around the technology. And it's a, well, what is better about Silence over Sentinel-1, or what is better over Deep Instinct over Silence? It's not that simple. It is far more about the deliverables that come with it. Do you want to, as an MSP, operate the technology? Do you want to be responsible for the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year of the incredible amount of rich data and information that Deep Instinct or Silence is going to provide you? Or do you want to partner with an organization that is going to bring you a higher level of efficacy, that's going to help you with your configurations? They're going to help you, train you to make sure that you're following best practices and allow you to sleep peacefully at night. If you're looking for the latter, you want to pick Silence and the Solutions Granted team. If you like Deep Instinct and you think it is an amazing product, please don't do it on your own. If I had to pick anybody in the world, I would go to Blockworks. I would talk to Rob and his team. I think that they are probably the most valuable experts with Deep Instinct that I'm aware of in the market space today. But Rob's not here, and we are. So pick us and pick Silence.
All right, everybody. I appreciate everybody being on this call. Top of the hour. Look, we didn't do that bad on time. I like it.
No, not too bad at all.
All right, everybody, have a great one. Appreciate it. We'll get this edited. I believe we're putting this on our YouTube. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's going to go up there for sure.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Everybody have a great day. Stay safe.
Have a good one.
Thanks.